Ottawa, Justin Trudeau will huddle with his cabinet ministers this week to craft the political narrative they will take to Canadians ahead of next year's federal election. But the reality is that heading into an election year, the Liberals face political risks beyond their control: the uptick in asylum seekers coming across the border, a tempestuous president in the White House, and emerging opposition in key provincial capitals. The recent appointment of former Toronto Police Chief Bill Blair as Minister of Border Security and Organised Crime Reduction signaled the government's intention to make border integrity and security a top priority. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, Justin Tang, the Canadian Press file photo, how governments handle events not of their making often shapes their mandate and determines their success. In this case, the outside forces exerting pressure on Trudeau's Liberals are huge, and so are their potential impacts on defining issues like trade and climate policy. With a federal election now just over a year away, the wedge issues that could define the campaign are taking shape: the environment and carbon pricing, refugees, immigration, and broader issues of diversity. Wednesday's gathering will be the first cabinet meeting since Trudeau shuffled his ministerial lineup in July, moving some politicians to new portfolios and bringing in several new faces to better grapple with the political challenges now facing his government. Article continued below. The appointment of former Toronto Police Chief Bill Blair as Minister of Border Security and Organised Crime Reduction signaled the government's intention to make border integrity and security a top priority, Trudeau said on the day of the shuffle. Read more. Opinion: Tim Harper, Conservative eruptions are a gift for Justin Trudeau's Liberals. Opinion: Susan Delacourt, can the drifting Liberals find a future in their past? Justin Trudeau vows to speak out on human rights, refuses to back down in Saudi Arabia dispute. Have asylum seekers entering Canada from the United States has become a political flashpoint, with opposition Conservatives, Quebec and Ontario, and municipal leaders in Montreal and Toronto all clamoring for federal action on the file. The Conservatives have been sharply critical of the government on the issue, charging that the Liberals are mismanaging the border. Article continued below. In response, Trudeau says the opposition is playing a very dangerous game around the politics of fear, politics of division. Last month he accused them of raising anxieties that frankly don't help solve problems but actually hinder them. David Coletto, chief executive at Abacus Data, warns that such strong language, while potentially in line with the perspective of most Canadians, risks inflaming a significant minority of voters who feel insecure about their economic position and changing demographics. Trudeau's defense of diversity could come across as condescending, he said. That said, Coletto argues the same message, if communicated the right way, could rally voters away from the Conservatives, as in the 2015 election when the party proposed creating a barbaric cultural practices snitch line. You're playing with fire, on both sides, when you get into this kind of discussion, Coletto said in an interview. And I don't think it's easily controlled once it's lit. Ministers are also expected to discuss measures to curb gun violence, such as last month's shooting on Toronto's Danforth Avenue. That left 2 people dead and 12 wounded. The suspected gunman also died. Toronto's CIT Council has called for a ban on handguns, and Montreal may add its support for the move. Trudeau said last week that recent tragedies have lawmakers considering ways to do more. There are things we need to hear, and we need to reflect more on next steps. Certainly hearing what Toronto is proposing, and probably Montreal as well, that certainly will help us, he told reporters. On the day of the cabinet shuffle, Trudeau said the changes were motivated by new realities facing the government at home and abroad, a reminder how much has changed since his party took office in 2015. At that time, Barack Obama was in the White House, giving rise to quips about a bilateral bromance with Trudeau. Kathleen Wynne was Ontario's premier, giving her backing for federal initiatives such as the National Climate Change Strategy and Ottawa's ambitions for a national pharmacare plan. Trudeau's world is now considerably more difficult. The Canada-U.S. relationship has soured under President Donald Trump, who has imposed tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, prompting retaliation from Ottawa. Personal relationship also appears strained, with Trump lashing out at Trudeau in the wake of the G7 summit for making what he called false statements, and calling the Prime Minister very dishonest and weak. This friction has added another layer of complication to what was inevitably going to be a treacherous negotiation with the United States over a new North American free trade agreement. Talks now appear to be in limbo, with more blunt talk from Trump. Their tariffs are too high, their barriers are too strong, so we're not even talking to them right now, the president said last week. The cabinet moves are meant to help deal with all that, Trudeau said on the day of the shuffle, with the appointment of Manitoba MP James Carr to the renamed post of Minister of International Trade Diversification. I think there's no question that the international context is constantly changing, Trudeau said, discussing the need to diversify export markets, to ensure that we are not as dependent on the U.S. The Prime Minister acknowledged changes on the domestic front too, most recently the Progressive Conservatives taking power at Queen's Park, led by Premier Doug Ford. It's early days, but already the relationship seems fraught. Ford's first act was to eliminate the province's cap-and-trade carbon pricing program, putting him at odds with Ottawa's national strategy to reduce emissions. Ottawa and Queen's Park have squabbled over the issue of asylum seekers. Gaining Ontario's support for a national pharmacare plan is now a question mark. Trudeau said he expects to have strong and positive conversations with the premiers. With elections yet to come in New Brunswick, Quebec and Alberta in the coming year, the shuffle was an acknowledgement Ottawa will face opposition among new premiers to its agenda. They had a fabulous honeymoon period. Then starting this year, things started to get away from them. You saw that in their approval ratings and their popular vote, said Lorne Bozinoff, president of Forum Research. The Liberals seem to be getting their act together, acting in a more concerted manner and starting to deal with issues, he said. Everything they do now is really geared to the next year. Jason Leiter, president of Enterprise Canada, a communications firm, and veteran Conservative strategist, expects the Liberals will highlight a centrist agenda over the coming months, and a renewed emphasis on the middle class. But there are dangers for the party. Elected on promises to improve Indigenous affairs, tackle climate change and renew foreign affairs, there are questions about how much progress they've made in each of those areas, Leiter said in an interview. Coletto said the wild card at play is Jagmeet Singh, the NDP leader's performance in the coming months, which includes a potential by-election run in Burnaby, BC. Could determine whether the Social Democratic Party shaves votes from the Liberals' left flank, or whether Trudeau hits the hustings without a credible progressive challenger. Historically, when the NDP is strong, like in the 1988 and 2011 elections, the Liberals are weakened and the Conservatives win, Coletto said. We really don't know how voters are going to react to Jagmeet Singh, he said. He still has, at least on paper, the potential to be a real threat. One thing, at least, is certain, there will be no snap election this fall. There had been speculation that the Liberals would go for an early election, ahead of the October 2019 date prescribed by legislation, to secure a new mandate on issues such as trade and climate change. But the Prime Minister said there would no early vote, at least not in the next few months. It has never been in our plans and it is not in our plans. There will be no federal election this fall, he said Thursday during a stop in Quebec. When the election does come, the political skirmishes so far on border security, climate change and economic issues could be a preview of what voters might see come the campaign, Coletto said. We're starting now to see where potential ballot questions might be in that election, Coletto said. And which ones benefit the parties, and so, more than 1 year out from voting day, campaign season is already upon us. Bruce Campion-Smith is the Star's Ottawa bureau chief and a reporter covering national politics. Follow him on Twitter, at @YoFlyer. Alex Olingal is an Ottawa-based reporter covering national politics. Follow him on Twitter, @Abalinga.